and welcome into another edition of the Cali to Cuse podcast, Up in the Rafters, your home for college basketball, covering everything from Cali to Syracuse. We got you covered. Today is Friday, January 29th. Thank you for joining us. Whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Anchor, anywhere you get your podcast, we are there. I'm your host, Anthony Scott, and alongside with me, as always, is Lucas Silverman out of California, but living in New York City, and Andrew Poppy Carey out of Syracuse, but now living in Jersey. Lucas, how we doing?
I'm doing pretty well. This is my last day on the podcast. I just invested into this company called GameStop, ticker GME. So you guys won't be hearing from me for a while. Oh, wait, I think today was the day to buy it, or was that 2 days ago?
I think you missed the wave. I think you're about a week behind there, Lucas.
Oh, rats.
I'm glad you're sticking around. We couldn't lose you on the podcast, honestly.
I guess I'm staying now.
Poppy, how you doing? Did you get into that GameStop mess?
No GameStop. It's time to jump on the AMC wave, Lucas. You're behind. Maybe Nokia. Nokia products are flying off the shelves, I hear.
Can we?
I love a good movie theater. Dogecoin. I love a good movie theater, Pop, but Nokia really screams to me. They might make a huge comeback.
Yeah, movie theaters are very popular during a worldwide pandemic, I hear.
That's just what makes no sense. The companies that are popping off are literally just shit companies. But if you haven't heard of what's going on in the stock market, definitely look it up. Some crazy times ahead of us. The billionaires are basically getting screwed. But that's not what we're here for. We're here for some college basketball talk. Obviously, we're about a month away here from March, so the bubble talk is ramping up. The NCAA tournament is right around the corner. Fingers crossed that it happens due to COVID. But yes, we are Cali to Cuse, Up in the Rafters. You can catch us every Friday where you get your podcast. And you can also catch us on the Challenge Sports. The Challenge Sports, a new website. They're all about the realest takes from the fans in sports and esports. We got articles over there, streams, another podcast, some merchandise, and we have a new baseball podcast that is starting up in a few months as well. So the challenge-sports.com. You're going to want to check them out. You can catch our podcast every Friday over there as well. But let's move over to some college basketball. Syracuse, interesting week, Lucas.
Very much, to say the least. After an impressive win on Saturday, beating Virginia Tech at home 78-60, they faced a really tough challenge on Tuesday, I believe, or was it Monday? One or the other. It didn't matter because UVA was going to smoke Cuse in any day, ending in a Y. Beating the crap out of Syracuse 81-58. They won the game they were supposed to win, though, I will say. And now they'll have two home games against NC State and Louisville coming up. But let's start with, obviously, the game that they smoked Virginia Tech in. Obviously, it seems like they put everything together, and they were really awake for that matchup with Guerrier, Griffin, Dolage combining for 53 of 78 points. And despite only shooting an abysmal 4 of 13 from three-point range, Syracuse actually was able to rebound with Virginia Tech, even out-rebounding them by 3. Pop, we'll send it to you first. Right now, do you think that Virginia Tech is more of a mid-tier team in the ACC, and it's really hard to judge these wins based on the quality of it?
Personally, I think Virginia Tech's a pretty good team. I don't think that they're a mid-tier team. I think they're at the top end of the league. That being said, Tyrese Radford, a starter for them, a guy averaging double figures in scoring, just got arrested in Blacksburg that night after Syracuse beat them for a DUI charge. So that's definitely going to hurt that team. But, Virginia Tech, they're not a quad 1 win for the Orange, who's still looking for that first elusive quadrant 1 win. But it is a very quality win over a ranked opponent at the time, and something that they can certainly build on. Lucas, you mentioned that they kind of put things together. In terms of the defensive end and rebounding, I certainly think they put things together. They got to the foul line a lot more than they have been in other games. But that being said, the three-point shooting is still the MO of this team. I think that's what Jim Boeheim and the players want to be, is a three-point shooting team, and they didn't get it done against Virginia Tech, Anthony, despite an 18-point win.
Yeah, Syracuse only shot 4 for 13 from the three, but I guess the big number is only 13 attempts. I mean, I'm happy that they didn't just stick with the three. They were able to get it inside and dominate a little bit down low, with obviously led by Guerrier and Dolage down there. But Virginia Tech, this is another team that likes to shoot threes. They're only 8 for 29 in that game, so not their best performance. I'm surprised Virginia Tech isn't a quad one win, though. I mean, 11-3, that's pretty solid record. But Syracuse still have to get that quad one win somewhere else. But yeah, I mean, I liked it. Kadari Richmond still needs more minutes. I'm going to say it every single week on the podcast till I see 30 minutes in the box score for him. Only 15 minutes, 5 for 6 from the field. Obviously creating defense. He didn't get any steals, but he had tip passes, deflections. That's what he does. He just makes the defense so much active, makes the offense so much more active. Everything just looks better with him out there. Only 15 minutes, still not enough, but Syracuse was able to get it done 78-60 in a game that they honestly needed. They needed just a big win. They were sliding a little bit as of late. This win brought them to 9-4 in the season. And finally, like you said, got that first ranked win. I think that's a big confidence boost. And last thing, to the rebounding point you made, I think Syracuse is undefeated when they out-rebound the other team. And good news, Sidibe finally practices this week. Maybe, just maybe, we can get him back after this injury. It was only supposed to cost him 4 weeks. We're now on week 8 without Sidibe.
I was going to say, you had been talking for 2 minutes without mentioning Sidibe. I wanted to make sure everything was okay with you because you have to mention him every single time. And it's great to see that he's back at practice. It's important for that team, especially for their depth. And Dolezaj can only do so much. He really is the heart and soul of the team, in my opinion, just doing all the dirty work, all the little things that are needed to win a game. The Virginia Tech player, he needed a beer after losing by 18 at Syracuse. It's cold up in Syracuse, needed that beer coat, got to get warm up a little bit. But, I hope everything works out with him. And that'll be interesting to see how Virginia Tech does moving forward without him, seeing as though they aren't even a quadrant one win as is. So they have to move forward with that. But now let's get into the nitty gritty. We have to start with the highs before we get to the lows with Syracuse right now. And we're dipping into that low right now. Syracuse obliterated 81-58. Watch that game. UVA is number 8. They only have 2 losses, and one of them is to number 1 Gonzaga, where we already, have bolstered Gonzaga into the premier teams in the country. Maybe this is a sign that UVA is the premier ACC team. But Pop, I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about your boy. Actually, more like Buddy or Jim Boeheim's boy, Mr. Buddy Boeheim. I'll give you the floor for this.
Yeah, it's just getting to the point now where you see Buddy Boeheim on the floor and you see who his dad is on the sideline. And we're really at the point where nepotism is really becoming an issue here. I mean,
Isn't that how the country works, though?
Yeah, it is. That's kind of how the world goes around. But it isn't really how the world goes around in athletics a lot of times. A lot of times coaches are harder on their kids, if anything. And that seems to be the exact opposite with Jim Boeheim and Buddy. He's never yelling at Buddy. Buddy had an awful game against Virginia, easily one of the worst games he's played in his career here. I believe he shot 1 of 8 from the field and had 5 turnovers. And we're getting to a point now where Buddy Boeheim on the season is keeping that stat alive, where he has more field goal attempts, 165, than total points scored, 160. And, what's really discouraging with Buddy, too, is he didn't even play well in that Virginia Tech game. He hasn't played well since the first half of the North Carolina game, really. That's his – I think he had a pretty good game against Miami, but still I think he struggled to shoot efficiently. And, it's getting to the point where him and Joe Girard, they're out there for their shooting. I don't know how many times we have to say this, and they're not hitting shots. So I don't know what they're doing out there. Woody Newton was playing very well at the beginning of the season and looked like a guy who could maybe spare Buddy at the 2. But Jim Boeheim's saying that Woody is not practicing well all of a sudden, so he can't get any minutes in games. You blowing out Virginia Tech by 18. He can't play 1 minute in the game. It's just embarrassing. The guy on the sideline is old. He's just he is what he is. He's stubborn and old.
Yeah, going into that Virginia game, obviously riding the high of the Virginia Tech game, I was a little nervous for Virginia because they're another animal on defense. And Buddy Boeheim, I think in the first half, once again, threw another turnaround jumper up, a prayer, really. The man he can't get by anybody. Doesn't have the speed. He's a little bigger, but he's not huge, so he just backs him down to the foul line and then throws up a turnaround, very tough shot jumper. I've seen it millions of times this year. He's got to stop doing that. And every time he was in charge of handling the ball, bringing it up court, you just crossed your fingers that he didn't turn it over because it seemed like every pass he made was, I don't even know where it was going half the time. And it just looked terrible for Syracuse. I didn't expect Syracuse to win this game against Virginia. I thought they might have kept it close if you started Kadari, but once again, We ran with JG, Buddy to start the game. We're quickly down 8 in the first 5 minutes. And then Kadari came in, held the lead around 8 for a little bit. But then the shooting of Virginia, actually the shooting of Sam Hauser, I should say, just took over. Sam Hauser, 7 of 13 from 3. You're not going to win many games when he's putting up career highs against Virginia. This Virginia team is back. They struggled in the beginning of the year. They had that loss to San Francisco, I think. I think they had a close game against Kent State. But since then, they've done nothing but roll. They're 7-0 in ACC play. This is the cream of the crop. Virginia, Tony Bennett, they're going to be at the top each year as long as he's the coach there. Their system is too good. And this just was a wake-up call, hopefully to Syracuse, hopefully to Jim Boeheim, that you stand absolutely zero chance against a top 10 team if you have Joe Girard and Buddy Boeheim as your backcourt. Syracuse can be a bubble team with them. They might win some against the bad teams in the ACC, but against premier competition, there's zero chance. I mean, honestly, there's zero chance for Syracuse in general, but there's negative chance if you're going to throw Joe Girard and Buddy Boeheim out there.
I do think you're right that the general sentiment from Syracuse was, UVA was going to win this game. It wasn't really going to be close. It was going to be a little bit more difficult for them. It's just the way they played and how they did not execute at all. Buddy Boeheim struggled immensely. Tony Bennett does know how to prepare for Syracuse. Once you are in the ACC for so long, you know how to play these teams. And Syracuse is so specific about the way they specifically play. In the first 5-10 minutes of the game, I saw 4 alley-oops, and that's just getting into the backside of the zone, having your point guard in the middle of the zone penetrate that, and you're just throwing lobs and throwing it to the sky, and your guys are coming down and slamming it home. I will say that other center, Huff, is his last name?
Yeah.
First name, he had his career high against Syracuse, but he also played immensely well, just owning the paint against the likes of Dolage and even Guerrier. But we all know that out of these next 3 or 4 games dating back from our last podcast, they had to win 3 out of 4. We knew they had to beat Virginia Tech, which they got. They lost that one from UVA. We were expecting them. And now they have these 2 huge games coming up against NC State and Louisville. One thing to mention with NC State is they lost their leading scorer to an ACL injury. So that's really big for Syracuse, but also detrimental to Syracuse because they need to start building up those good quadrant wins. Do you believe that they do have to sweep these 2 to stay in the race to make the tournament? And at home, they're just a different animal at home. Going to UVA might have been a struggle to them versus them being at the Dome without the fans, but at least having a home court advantage. Hey, Scott, do you feel like they need to sweep these 2 to even stay alive? Or do you think they can lose to like a Louisville team, which we have seen previously do really well?
I don't think they need to sweep. They definitely need to take one, I'll tell you that. I mean, even if they lose at Louisville, they still get to play Louisville again later in the season, so maybe they can pick up a win there. But you're right. It's going to be a lot easier at home. Syracuse only has 1 loss at home this year, and that was that Pittsburgh game that they were up like 18 in the first half on and just blew it. So Syracuse, they definitely need to get 1. I think NC State is the one they're looking at. You can take 2, then you're looking in a great position heading down the stretch. But even if they don't get these 2 wins, I mean, there's still some chances to pick up some quality wins at Clemson, at Louisville, at Duke, who is still getting some recognition in some of the ratings, and then UNC to finish out the year. So really only 4 or 5 tough games left on the schedule, but the bubble, very weaker this year, very, very weak this year in general. And just the amount of teams that don't have quality wins and the amount of teams that are under bans this year is going to open up some more slots. So I think Syracuse still on track to get in as a bubble team. You sweep these 2 today, you really solidify your spot in the tournament.
Yeah, Pop, right now we're seeing Cuse and Joe Lunardi's bracketology currently in the next 4 out teams, pretty much the same spot that they were in last time we talked. Do you think that if they win both of these games, they'll move into that maybe first 4 out, first 4 in, or do you think they have a lot more work to do?
Some of it's going to depend on whether or not the teams in front of them lose, of course. I'm not so much grouping these next 2 games together as I am these next 3 for Syracuse. I think they need to win 2 out of the next 3. NC State is a must-win. That game you need to win, especially now with Devin Daniels out for the season, who last year had his career high against Syracuse, really had a coming-out party against them in the Dome and proved that he's a very good player who was averaging 16 points per game for the Wolfpack this year. But that being said, Louisville and Clemson, especially at Clemson, a team who's been pretty good at home. They've been struggling as of late in general, but they're a quality opponent. They need to split between Louisville and Clemson, and NC State is a must-win in my opinion. I guess if you were to beat both Louisville and Clemson while losing to NC State, that'd be acceptable because it's two better wins. But at the same time, NC State is just a bad team at this point without Devin Daniels. They're really going to suffer from losing him.
And Poppy, I don't expect Sidibe to be back this week. He's just practicing right now, but how much of a difference would Sidibe make in these games? Just how much would he maybe change the team in your mind?
I mean, I'm going to get called cynical for this, but honestly, I think that if Barama Sidibe comes back, I'm expecting him to get injured within the first two games again. His knees are shot. There's nothing else that can be said. He's done. Like, his career is over at Syracuse in my book. If he comes back, that'd be great, and plays well. I'm rooting for the kid. It's not like I'm not rooting for him, but I really just have zero confidence in those knees.
Yeah, if Sidibe is not going to come back, we need to start playing Edwards at least a little bit. I mean, we have 6 guys out here that we're playing, and no rest for any of the big men. The only guy getting minutes on the bench is Kadari. So you're leaving Dolajai and Guerrier out there for 40 minutes every night. And against Virginia, at one point in the game, I hate to say it, but Guerrier looked a little tired, and it would have been nice. Braswell did come in for a few minutes in that game, but we need to start getting these bigs a little bit of a break, whether it's Edwards or anyone else, because you can't just at 40 minutes each game and just expect them to be fine.
Yeah, they had a fairly highly rated true freshman center come in this year, Frank Anselm. I'd like to see him get some minutes. He reclassified from the class of 2022 and enrolled this year. I mean, he played a little bit earlier on in the season, but apparently he also has been hurt dealing with an injury. So it'd be nice to see him or Jesse Edwards get some minutes, though, because rebounding is an issue for this team.
Undefeated when we out-rebound. Put the bigs in.
Yep.
For our listeners, you always have to preface with Pop, as pessimistic as he sometimes seems to be about his Syracuse Orange. It comes from a realistic mindset, and just the consistency of what his takes are usually turn out the case. So Syracuse fans, you can see that right now they have a lot more work to do, but there are some good things up ahead, and they can make a good case for themselves against NC State, Louisville, and Clemson. Speaking of Clemson, they were one of 3 teams to drop out of our top 25 this week as we go into our top 25 update, alongside Oregon and UConn. 2021 and 23, those 3 teams dropped out of the top 25. But towards the top of that list, I'm going to keep saying it again, it's the same 4, 5, 6 teams that are going to be there for the rest of the season, like the Baylors, Gonzagas, Villanovas, Michigan, and Houstons of the world. One team that has been there consistently and was riding high was a Texas team, which at number 5 lost earlier this week to Oklahoma lost to Oklahoma by 1 without Shaka Smart. Shaka Smart tested positive for COVID. He's going to be out for a couple of weeks. Obviously, he has a great assistant coaching staff, but obviously without the leader at the ship, it's hard to really go bat for your team. And only losing by 1, they worked really hard for that. Another impressive thing, Bama. We talked about them last week. Huge week. Moved up 9 spots to the top 10, and now they are currently number 9 with the big weekend ahead. Other notable things that happened, Tennessee dropped 12 spots. Remember they were in the top 10? No longer. Now they're in the high teens. What do you guys right now, A. Scott, what do you guys think about the fluctuation and how much a team moves up and how much a team moves down with so little games being played, so many postponed? And if you have a 3-game winning streak, you can move up into the top 25, into the top 15 just because you're winning versus not even playing.
Yeah, I like it. I like all the fluctuation. I think the voters are finally slowly getting it right. I like the top 10 a lot right now. One team that wasn't getting as much appreciation, and they finally are. I think they're in the top 15 now. Actually, they're 16th right now. Is Florida State. They're 10-2 on the year. They're finally putting it together. They've won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a row, and only one of them was by single digits. They're just blowing teams out in the ACC, wins over UNC, Louisville, Clemson, Miami. So Florida State's really putting it together. Maybe watch them to keep climbing up the rankings. Maybe they could challenge Virginia as the best team in the ACC. But besides that, I think those are the only 2 teams in the ACC that I think deserve to be near the top 10. Other than that, other rankings, I'll say it again, the top 3, the top 4, they are the top 4. Michigan's the only team that I'm a little scared of. But I love what's at the top of the country. I think those are the best teams. I really like Alabama. They've shown me a lot over the last few weeks, and they're definitely the top team in the SEC.
Hey, Scott, that 5 count was impressive. I'm glad Ithaca taught us how to count the 5.
I thought
That
it
was
was
great.
6, but I had to recount it. I was like, wait, no, it's only 5.
Hey, go to Ithaca College. You can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just like that. One thing about Florida State, I love Scotty Barnes. He was a McDonald's All-American. Going to a Florida State school was a shocker to me. I thought he was amazing. He played with Vernon and Carey back in high school, and I thought those two were unstoppable. He probably could have went to a blue blood, but chose Florida State. I love that move for him, and it's reaping benefits. Pop, right now, is the fluctuation good for the NCAA, or is it just too confusing to keep track of at this point?
Yeah, I think it's good. And I know another topic that we've really touched on is just the new teams kind of in the top 25, especially in the top 10 rather than the blue bloods. I believe Leonard Hamilton, the head coach of Florida State, calls his program a new blood, which I find interesting. Same, I believe Baylor is calling themselves a new blood as well. So these programs are trying to mold themselves into basketball schools now, or these athletic departments, I should say. And it's kind of working. You know, Scotty Barnes, you mentioned it. He spurns a lot of blue bloods, and he decides to go to Florida State, one of the new bloods. And that's what you're seeing in the top 10 right now. You know, Michigan under Jawan Howard, you know, they were a very good program before with John Beilein, but he seems to kind of redefine the team and brought his own aspect of in style from the NBA over to Michigan. Gonzaga, certainly they've been very good in the past, but they're at another level this year. And, you know, you mentioned earlier, Lucas, just how there's so few games going on. That's why we're seeing so much movement in the top 25 and the top 10 in general, which I like. I think it's pretty cool and fascinating. It makes for an interesting season.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely makes more things on the line. A Scott, I'll let you go in a second, but it just means so many more things are on the line. Like you could have a great week, go 3-0, 2-0 against some quality teams, and then you have a slip up, and then you just move a ton of spots because all these other teams are also doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm. I just want to make a point on Poppy's new blood or the new blue bloods and the old blue bloods. I mean, Duke, Michigan State, UNC, Kentucky, nowhere to be found in the top 25. The only really blue blood in the top 25 is Kansas, and they've been struggling this year. And yeah, I think there are these new blue bloods coming out. I like Gonzaga is one. Virginia and Tony Bennett is one. Florida State's been good these last few years. I do just want to plug my article I wrote this week on thechallengesports.com. Head over there and check it out. I kind of dissect, give my thoughts on why I think this shift is happening, because I think a small shift is happening. But obviously Duke, Michigan State, those teams, they will be back next year. But I think they're going to have a lot more competition year in and year out. And these down years from these Duke, Kentuckys, I think the fans have to be a little more accustomed to seeing them happen.
Well, whether you want to call them new bloods or old bloods, the Baylors and Florida States have combined for 0 national championships. So before they can start calling themselves new bloods, I need to see some more out of them. I don't even consider Gonzaga a new blood. They are a blue blood, in my opinion, in sense of like a little brother circumstance, just because they don't get the top recruits all the time. They get some really good recruits. They're going to have the #1 overall pick this year. So that's a great start. But, you know, Baylor, how about you gain as many national championship as your women's team before we start having conversations about whether you're a new blood or not? Let's pump the brakes on that one a little bit.
Definitely got some
final thing. They have a lot of work to do if they're going to be able to compare themselves to the women's program. That women's program is elite and one of the best programs in all of women's college basketball. So, sorry, digress. One last thing before we move on. Hey, Scott, no love for Drake? Undefeated. What is the NCAA undefeated tracker looking like right now?
Yeah, undefeated teams left in college basketball. Baylor, Gonzaga, they've been leading the pack. But the other 3 undefeated teams, none of them are in the top 25. Winthrop is 15-0. I believe Drake is also 15-0. And Alabama A&M, they're only 4-0. They've had so many games canceled, but they are undefeated, so maybe keep an eye on them. But yeah, Drake, Winthrop, I want to see them get in the top 25. I think they're going to make some noise in the tournament. They'll probably be, I don't know, probably around the 12-5 matchup. They may be the underdog in that. That's usually where you see those underdog mid-major teams seeded. So I think that they could be teams that watch out for upsets in the first week. But, yeah, I want to see them get in the top 25. St. Louis is there. I mean, they're playing a little tougher conference, the A10, but give Drake some love, you know?
Yeah, Drake.
They're making so many people money. They're 13-0 against the spread.
I was just going to say, Drake 13-0 against the spread. They're making people money. They just played Missouri State, I believe, 2 games in a row as well. And they covered both of those, which was pretty impressive, especially given the fact that in the NBA we've seen a lot of teams, split those back-to-back games. But Drake covers both of them. given on a last-second dunk, I believe is how they covered in the last game. But nonetheless, they covered. They fattened everybody's wallets. And, yeah, Drake is a good team. I really like St. Louis as well out of the A-10. They've had some very good seasons in years past and are always good for an upset come March Madness time.
So 5 teams left on the undefeated tracker. Obviously, a lot of those teams, the Drake, the Winthrops, they'll have to win their college basketball or their conference tournament, in order to get in the NCAA tournament, most likely, unless they have some quality wins on their schedule. But speaking of those conference tournaments, we had an interesting quote from an ACC coach, Chris Mack, the head coach of Louisville. He said he thinks, I'll read the quote word for word, "I do believe there will be some teams that opt out of conference tournaments, knowing they are a shoo-in for the NCAA tournament," end quote. I mean, I don't see this happening. I don't know. It just seems like the conference tournament, it's still something to fight for. An ACC championship, that's a pretty successful season. Even, I mean, obviously the end goal is the NCAA tournament championship, but they're important games in my mind. It would be disappointing to see a lot of these teams opt out, but I understand COVID is a factor. Your thoughts on this?
I think my first initial thought when I first saw that quote was it can go either two ways. Kentucky, horrible season. They're so ready for it to be over. No reason to be in the SEC tournament for them to get shit pumped by Bama. No reason. Second point, if Drake and Winthrop are undefeated and they're going into their conference tournament and they still need that automatic bid, in order to make a case for themselves to be like, if we're undefeated and we want that bid regardless of if we're in the tournament or not, that'll really put the NCAA in a bind, because how are you going to not let 2 undefeated teams into the NCAA tournament, all stemming from the fact that they didn't win their conference tournament and that's the only way they can get in?
Yeah, I think, a team like Drake or Winthrop would probably end up doing this. I think he's meaning this more toward like the Power 5 teams that would probably be a shoo-in. But that being said, it's still a very interesting thought. I don't blame the teams that want to sit out, because of COVID. There has been conversations in general. A lot of these conference tournaments haven't even really been announced that they're going to happen. I mean, I think the ACC announced that if there is one, it's going to be in Greensboro, North Carolina. But I don't necessarily know if they have an outline or a plan yet, which is something that the conference is going to have to develop as well as we move along here. And, the clock's ticking on that. Conference tournaments are supposed to start in about a month and a week, probably 5 weeks from now. And, if you got a team like UVA, it's hard to blame them to want to sit out because, they're probably going to run the table or, they're not going to lose many more games left in the regular season. So they're definitely a team who's going to make it to March Madness. I guess if you want to improve your seeding, that would be a good argument for going to the conference tournament. A lot of times, you're looking at teams coming in maybe 10th and they rank 10th in the country to their conference tournament. They win their conference tournament. They end up maybe a 1 seed, a 2 seed. So you can really improve your seeding based on conference tournaments.
Yeah, we saw that with, I think, Kemba Walker's UConn squad ended up a 3 seed after his crazy run in the Big East tournament back in the day. That's when I remember they went on to win the whole thing that year. But, yeah, I think this brings up a lot of interesting points because I feel like they should maybe cancel the conference tournaments the more I'm thinking about it. Because wouldn't you want all the players to be quarantining for 2 weeks, not really playing any basketball ahead of the big dance, the NCAA tournament? And I feel like if you play these conference tournaments, you're just opening a little bit more risk for players to have to sit out, quarantine, that sort of thing. And then another thing, let's say Virginia does sit out. Let's say Florida State does sit out. Let's say Louisville sits out. It's going to make an easier road for a team like Syracuse or even a team like Miami to upset 1 or 2 teams, win the conference tournament, and now they get the automatic bid, leaving some of these mid-major teams and teams on the bubble fighting. So I think it brings up a lot of interesting points. It could get screwy. Do you think that these teams, that the conference tournament should be happening in general because of the quarantine issue? That's the one thing I'm more worried about.
That's the interesting question about this, because there's always a risk whenever you play a game now. Are they going to get traced correctly? Are they not? I think that it's going to be interesting to see what these top teams do. I think Pop makes a good point. This isn't for the Drakes and Winthrops. It's really for the Power 5 teams that have just had a hellacious season, had to sit out multiple weeks, are not that good, and why put themselves at risk of injury as well as, getting sick in COVID in order for them to just get blown out by a UVA or a Baylor in the Big 12 or ACC tournament. It's really about what that risk and those costs look like. I still think that
you could see top teams and bad teams sitting out, Lucas, because I was talking about the top team sitting out just waiting for the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I think you could definitely see both ways. I think,
Mhm.
a team that's 0-10 in the ACC play, I don't think there is one currently, but there might be. But, if they really don't want this season to happen and they have some development and they don't want their players to get that risk of being on the court, even being injured or, going through the tournament, I think that's very valid. But I don't think that's really going to happen. I imagine that all these teams are going to be playing, and it's always going to be that first domino to fall. Once one domino fall, it all falls down. It's just going to be curious to see who is that first one to fall.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to monitor that situation. But guys, I'm just going to bring up this. I mean, what are we going to do if there's no NIT this year? Because that would be devastating.
Cal will not
That's
have a
good for
season.
Syracuse because that's where we're probably going to be.
Yeah, we'll see. Cal and Cuse will be in the NIT, so I'm looking forward to having those battles with you guys. I don't know how the NIT is going to function without them. Is there even an NIT anymore? I was devastated that there wasn't even a Maui Invitational. How can I go without an NIT now?
The NIT, yeah, a lot of these teams probably going to be heading for the golf course earlier this year. Probably only 68 teams will be invited to the postseason play. All right, so yeah, I moved just the Big 12 SEC championship. I just moved that all to the bottom, or the challenge, I mean. I just took it out of the Texas talk and just moved it to the Pick'em talk.
Yeah, and just say that I mentioned like Shaka already. Be like,
Yeah.
I already mentioned that he had COVID, but yeah. Sounds good.
You good?
Send it. Yeah.
All right. 3. I'm not sure I'm recording. All right. 3, 2, 1. All right, now let's move over to the Big 12, where a lot of things keep happening because there's a lot of teams ranked in the top 25. It seems like every night in this conference, there's a top 10, top 15 matchup happening. And Texas, they were in the thick of things this week, but they were upset a little bit to Oklahoma. The Sooners take down Texas in a nail biter, 80-79. No Shaka Smart in this one, like you mentioned already, Lucas. Are we a little bit worried about this Texas team, or is the bigger story here that Oklahoma might actually be a threat? They already have wins over Kansas, West Virginia, and now Texas.
When I think of this game, I think of that emoji of just two handshakes. It's a great game for Oklahoma to squeak this one out. They almost blew it, but having that win against a really good Texas team is impressive, regardless if Shaka is there or not. And then you got to give credit to Texas. They were in that game. They kept fighting. They lost by 1. Obviously, you hate to lose, but they gained a lot of confidence, I think, playing a really tough Oklahoma team without their leader in Shaka Smart.
Probably.
Yeah, a very tough Oklahoma team, a team that I've been a little high on. I've seen him play a little bit, and you got a very good point guard who can score the ball. Brady Manick is still there. He was playing with Trae Young. He's been there forever. I think Oklahoma is a very quality team. I don't think that their win against Kansas is all that impressive. I'm completely out on Kansas this year. I don't think they're very good. They have a couple quality wins, Creighton, West Virginia, and also Texas Tech, but that was a little different Texas Tech team. If they play again, which I'm not sure if they do, but if they do, I think it's going to be a lot different outcome. And they are scheduled to play them on the 20th this month, so that'll be one to keep an eye on. But all that being said, I think Texas is in a bit of trouble without Shaka Smart. I don't expect him to be back Tuesday. They're taking on Baylor. Obviously, they're in trouble with or without Shaka Smart in that game. But without him, I think that's a very big deal. And you could be looking at, a scary loss to a very, very good Baylor team, maybe getting run out of the gym a little bit.
Yeah, I think Shaka is one of those coaches where he really needs to be there on the sideline. I think he's one of those coaches that his players love to play for. He's younger. He's energetic. He's got that afro now. It seems to be working for him down in the Longhorn State. But, yeah, Shaka's going to need to be back. They might take a little dip here over the next couple of games, but I'm not too worried about Texas. Their guard depth is just their guards are just too deep. I mean, anybody that they have is a top-tier guard handling the ball, and that's what wins in March. So not worried about Texas. The bigger story for me is Oklahoma. They keep winning. Brady Manick, like you said, he's been there forever, just knows how to get it done. And Austin Reeves averaging 15 points a game this year with 5 rebounds and 5 assists. Another player to look out for. He kind of does it all for that Oklahoma team. Oklahoma, Texas, both these teams going to be in the tourney, obviously. Texas, I think, is going to go far. Oklahoma, do we see them making a run in Sweet 16 at all?
You never know. They have the guard play. You mentioned their point guard, Austin Reavers. Is that his name, you said?
Reeves, yeah, it might be Reavers.
Austin Reeves. I think that the Big 12 has kind of moved into that conversation as being better than the Big 10, in my opinion. A lot of those teams early on in the season that we were very high on, Rutgers, Michigan State, and the Big Ten, have kind of slipped a little bit. And I think at this point, certainly the top end teams in the Big 12 are better than a lot of the top end teams in the Big 10. That's how I look at it. So I think that, it's going to be interesting to see how these teams play each other come tournament time. Sometimes you see where one conference gets a ton of teams into the Sweet 16. Maybe Oklahoma is one of those teams this year.
I kind of agree with you, Pop. I think there has been a shift in how good the Big 12 has been this year. Obviously, at the forefront of that is Baylor, one of the best teams in the country. But yeah, going down the line, Texas Tech is great. West Virginia is great. Texas, obviously, we talked about without Shaka is great. They're a loaded conference, and I think they needed to kind of get COVID out of their systems in order to really show that.
Yeah, and let's talk about one more big game in the Big 12 that took place this week. Texas Tech, West Virginia. This was a great game, close all the way. Texas Tech actually made a run to come back in this one a little bit, but then they fell short by 88-87. Mac McClung had the chance to be a hero once again. He hit the game winner against Texas. This time it was a lot tougher of a shot, kind of fading away. Mid-range jumper, missed it. West Virginia hangs on to the 1-point victory, and they're looking good without one of their better players, Oscar Tshiebwe. He's off the team. I think he's transferring to Kentucky, but they've been looking to roll even without him. This is their first big win since his departure. West Virginia, another team that could get in the Sweet 16, even though they lost one of their better players this year.
I always trust in Huggy Bear. Huggy Bear is just a warm place to be in at all times. He loves his players. He works them so hard. They usually are a pressing team. I don't really know if they're pressing as much as they used to, but when they put on the clamps, they can really put on the clamps. And they're a great team. Is Mac McClung Grayson Allen 2.0? Do we root against him?
No, he's way better. He's not dirty. I don't think he's a dirty player like Grayson Allen. That's why I couldn't stand with Grayson Allen.
Yeah, I think their games are similar, but I don't think that they're a similar kind of person. Grayson Allen's a jerk.
Yeah, maybe I was trying to just stir the pot a little bit to see what was going on. But in terms of play style, I agree with you, Pop. I think they play very similarly. Two really explosive guards that can get to the rim and kind of create their own shot. I thought that Mac McClung mid-range jumper was going to go in, and that would have been a steal for me. I think Texas Tech would have stole that game from West Virginia if he had made that. And now that he missed it, we know who Texas Tech is going to have the ball in their hands moving forward, because Mac McClung has proven that he can make the big shot, and he also has confidence to be able to get off the big shot.
Yeah, and this Texas Tech team, it's pretty deep. I mean, off the bench, you have Terrence Shannon Jr., a sophomore, put up 15 against West Virginia. He's having a good season, averaging 12 points a game. Santos Silva, another player that can just come in, do his job, know his role. Chris Beard Texas Tech might need to be another team that we throw in the new blood conversation.
I think Texas Tech is certainly one of those new bloods. But for me, this game was more impressive on the West Virginia side of things. You mentioned they're without Oscar Tshiebwe. They make 12 of their last 13 field goals to finish the game and end up winning. So obviously very efficient down the stretch. Lucas, you mentioned Bob Huggins and how they used to press. One of the things that I admire very much about Bob Huggins, because it is the complete polar opposite of the head coach of the team that I root for, Jim Boeheim, is Bob Huggins has the ability to adapt to his players unlike a lot of coaches. They used to run the press with Javon Carter when they had very good defensive-minded guards. Now their guards are a little more offensive-minded. They like to bang down low with Derek Culver. When they had Tshiebwe, they like to use him as well. So they've kind of morphed into more of an offensive team who hits the three and, really rebounds very well, especially on the offensive glass. They look to kick out to find those shooters on second chance opportunities. And that's just something that I really admire about Bob Huggins. I think no matter the talent you put in front of him, he can really make it a very competitive team no matter what. Maybe they're not going to be in the top 25, but they're going to be competitive in every game.
Bob Huggins got to be the most underrated coach in college basketball. Think about it. When's the last time you saw a West Virginia kid go in as a lottery pick in the NBA draft?
Yeah.
Almost now.
That's a good point. And Chris Beard is even also in that conversation. We forget that they were the national runner-up still. They were in the national championship game 2 years ago. So, Chris Beard is also building that great resume, along with Bob Huggins, who just has been around forever. And has just always put his team on the map, no matter what type of players he has. And if he gets a defensive-minded player like a Javon Carter, whew, that team can go far.
Exactly. Yeah. West Virginia.
Nobody can rock a pullover though, like Bob Huggins. Chris Beard can't rock a pullover like Bob Huggins. I love.
That's true.
Yeah, anytime you see that pullover on the sideline, you're watching a Bob Huggins game.
Bob Huggins is his own vibe. Literally,
Yeah.
Bob Huggins just doesn't give a shit what's going out there. He just wants his West Virginia Mountaineers to go out there and win a basketball game. Before we move over to our last topic of the Big 12, Derek Culver, you mentioned it, Poppy, a great player. He was kind of teamed up with Sheway as their two bigs before he left. Only 18 minutes against Texas Tech. He averages near 30 a game. He's a double-double machine. How big is he going forward? Are we a little concerned he didn't get a lot of playing time against Texas Tech?
It is a little concerning. He's a guy who's constantly in foul trouble, unfortunately. So that may have been an issue a little bit in that game in the early stages. He's a very good player, though, who West Virginia is definitely going to need if they want to make it far in the NCAA tournament.
And then we kind of talked about it, just the Big 12 dominance when we were talking about Texas and the Oklahoma game. But Baylor, Texas, Texas Tech, West Virginia, Kansas, now Oklahoma, all in the top 25. Are they going to get top four seeds? I think Baylor, Texas, Texas Tech, and West Virginia are locked into those top four seeds unless they have a meltdown. And maybe Oklahoma is better than Kansas, Pop. Lucas, I'll start with you because I know you love Kansas. How many top four seeds because we see out of the Big 12?
It's a good question. I'd probably have to say if the line's 4.5, go under.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be 3. I think they're going to beat each other up too much. And I think one slides, maybe a Texas slides because Shaka's out. Texas Tech, streaky, always playing close games. A couple games go here or there the wrong way. So I'd probably say closer to 3. You can guarantee that Baylor and Texas, I think, are going to be a top 4 seed. I think there's too much, and maybe even in West Virginia. I'd go 2 or 3.
Yeah. Pop, do you see any difference between the Big 12 and the Big 10? You said that the Big 12 is kind of moving ahead for you. Is there a reason why, or is it just what you're seeing on the court?
Part of it is what I'm seeing on the floor. I also think that in the Big 10, a lot of the games are much more reliant on, big man play, I want to say. Almost like the Big 12 is a league that gets up and down the floor, kind of plays a modern style of basketball, whereas maybe it's a stigma that I have about the Big 10, but it seems like it's a lot of low scoring, kind of grinded out games. That's not to say teams in the Big 12 don't have the ability to do that, but I just think that offensively, Michigan is in a class of its own in the Big 10, and then it's kind of everybody else, with maybe the exception of Illinois and Iowa. Those two teams can really score the basketball. Obviously, they have two great individual players, but I just don't think their team defense is there where it needs to be. I'm going to trust a West Virginia defense over this Illinois defense from what I've seen so far this year when it comes tournament time.
How many top 4 seeds out of the Big 12?
I clearly see 4 as a strong path to 4 for them. Baylor, Texas. I think when it's all said and done, Texas Tech is going to be a top 4 seed. And then West Virginia or Kansas, one of those two will also be. So I'm going to go 4.
I like what you said about the Big 10. No, I think that is a conference that is dominated by big men. And in college basketball, I think guards play a little more important role to the team's success. So I agree with you that the Big 12 is moving ahead of the Big 10 as the best conference in college basketball. And speaking of one of those guards in the Big 12 is West Virginia point guard Miles McBride. He is our Cali to Cuse Player of the Week this week. Each week we like to highlight a guy that maybe not many fans know about that could have some success in the NBA. This week we got point guard from West Virginia, Miles McBride, 16 points a game, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. Kind of does it all, Poppy.
Yeah, he kind of does it all. And one thing that he's really improved on this year in his sophomore campaign from his freshman campaign is his three-point shooting, up a whopping 17.5% from 3 percentage-wise. So, yeah, he's shooting 47.5% this year, 26 of 25. He's already made more threes than he did in his freshman season. He only made 24. He's 6'2". He's not the tallest guy in the world in terms of projecting him to the NBA as a guard. But that being said, he's kind of gritty. He's got that Bob Huggins, West Virginia vibe to him. I kind of could see him as like a Kyle Lowry ceiling guy in the NBA, a solid defender, a guy who can knock down some shots, knows his role, and is a really solid player in the league. I think that he's going to be very interesting to guy to watch as the season goes on and to see if his draft stock could rise maybe in March Madness. We've seen that before with Purdue's Carson Edwards is just one example that comes to mind.
Yeah, since our last podcast, in 2 games for Miles McBride, he's averaging 21 points a game, shooting 7 for 11 from 3, 5.5 assists. The height, though, he is a little smaller guard, but we've seen Javon Carter, right from West Virginia, make it to the NBA. Lucas, could we see this guy in the NBA?
I think he has the shooting ability to be in the NBA. If you can make a 3 out of 50%, nearly 50% clip, you have a really good shot. You mentioned Kyle Lowry's a great comparison. He's averaging almost 2 steals a game. Could he be a Javon Carter, but with the jumper? That could work for me as well.
Yeah, definitely. The shooting ability is the thing that sticks out for me, Poppy. I mean, if you can improve that, you definitely get your face in front of some NBA scouts. And March Madness could play a big role for this guy. It could play a big role for a lot of these guys. We didn't have March Madness last year, but we've seen year after year, at least 1 or 2 guys, their draft stock really rises. If West Virginia makes that deep run, Miles McBride could be the guy that rises up draft boards. Projected second-round pick right now, so definitely keep an eye on him as we wind down in the season. But coming up this week in college basketball, we already went through the ACC Big Ten Challenge in the earlier part of the season. Now we have the SEC versus Big 12 Challenge. And what's interesting about this is kind of a break from conference play, which you don't normally see out of teams once you get in conference play. It's pretty much all you play, but this is a nice little break. SEC taking on Big 12. Last year, they split 5-5. Lucas, are we seeing the Big 12 run away this year?
There's some really intriguing matchups that I think are coming up in this Big 12 SEC
Challenge.
break that they have. Challenge, yeah, whatever. And Big 12 has traditionally done well against the SEC. They've tied a couple of times, but traditionally Big 12 does smoke the SEC teams. But there's some good matches in here that I can see going one or 2 ways, Kansas to Tennessee, that's a toss-up in my opinion. Alabama, Oklahoma, 2 of the hottest teams in the country right now squaring off against each other. I think this is perfect for basketball right now because we lost so many games in the beginning half of the season due to COVID. Like we didn't get to see Baylor Gonzaga, for example, that It's nice to have a little bit of break from conference play to see how these 2 different conferences match up against each other. And it's a good debate in general can SEC get to the Big 12's level in terms of talent, especially in a down year for Kentucky that I won't even bother going down the road again for.
Yeah, let's pick a few of these games, Poppy. Your your Missouri squad just beat up on the Tennessee squad, but now Tennessee, they're taking on Kansas, who I know you're not a fan of. Are you going to stick with SEC in this one?
Yeah, this is an interesting matchup. Couple teams that have kind of been skidding and not playing up to their caliber. Certainly 2 top 10 teams earlier in the season that have faltered. Kansas, I think ultimately they're going to come away with a win. Bill Self, he's going to turn the team around and try and get things going. But this will be a very interesting game to watch just because of that fact. These are 2 teams that need a good win. They've been losing a bunch of games. So 2 talented teams. Should be a good one.
Lucas, I know you like your Jayhawks. They're going to get this one down?
I was thinking about it, and Pop's right. They're so down this year, and they're not great. Tennessee needs this win more than Kansas, I think. I think Kansas pretty much has a firm hold in the Big 12, and where they are in the Big 12, they're going to be a dangerous team in the tourney regardless. Tennessee is faltering, and I think it's a must-win for them. And I think at Tennessee is a big help to them. I believe they're at Tennessee. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go with the Vols here.
Yeah, Tennessee is the home team. They lost 2 of 3, and their 1 win was against Mississippi State by 3. Tennessee, I think they're going to get it done. I think they turn it around right here. This is their big wake-up call. The home team's definitely going to help them out a little bit. So I'll take Tennessee in this one. Next one up, Alabama, Oklahoma, number 9 against number 24. Lucas, you said these are the 2 hottest teams in the country, 2 of at least. Bama's been on a straight-up roll. But I'm going to say Oklahoma continues their upset stretch, and I think they're going to put an end to the Roll Tide.
It's always so funny because usually when we see an Alabama-Oklahoma ranked matchup, it's usually in college football, whether it's Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, Tua. It's so great to see that 2 programs that are so traditionally great at football are now very good at basketball. I'm going to Roll Tide here. It's Bama's year this year. They're hot. They have better – I think they actually do have better guard play as well with Javon Kinnerly and Petty. They're going to be able to shoot the lights out of the gym, and I don't think a team like Oklahoma can score and keep up that scoring with a team that Alabama averages like 80 points a game recently and over the last 3 or 4. I don't think they're going to be able to keep up. So I'm going to roll Tide here.
I'm also all in on Alabama in this one. Nate Oates, I think he's a great coach, a little better than Lon Kruger, who's on Oklahoma's sideline. And I just think, Alabama, great three-point shooting team. They've been doing it very consistently as well. I think that continues against Oklahoma, who I think is a good team, but, the guard depth just isn't really at the level of Alabama's.
Yeah, it's going to be a good game. I think they're ready to surprise some people. Maybe they got one more surprise in them. But we're going to skip over the Texas-Kentucky game because I think we all know we're all going to pick Texas in that one. But we're
Come on, give them a chance. No, I'm just kidding. Texas by a million. Whatever the spread is, hammer it.
Do they keep it in single digits? That's something I'll ask you.
I think Calipari makes it to the 16-minute quarter commercial break. I think that's when he makes it before he gets ejected.
But we will give you a third pick because it's probably the biggest game of the season, maybe, since we did get Gonzaga and Baylor canceled earlier in the year. We have Baylor going up against Texas. Texas is the home team. This game will be played on Tuesday night. Number 2 versus number 5 as it currently stands. Obviously, there may be shifts with the new rankings coming out on Monday. Baylor, Texas, this is the matchup I want to see. Texas, one of the few teams I think can beat Baylor because they actually have a lot of good guards that know how to take care of the ball. But no Shaka Smart's going to hurt them. For that reason, Baylor squeaks by, stays undefeated.
I think what I'm going to look for is you got to monitor that line. I think that the bettors are going to take into account that Shaka is not going to be there, and that's going to raise the lineup a little bit. I won't be surprised if this is like between 7 and 9. And if it's between 7 and 9, I do like Texas here with those points. I do think Baylor, I think it's going to be close is what I'm basically saying. And then I actually like Texas with the points here, whatever those points end up being.
Yeah, I would say if the line is something that high, I'm definitely hammering Texas, monitor the line to see if Shaka not being there is a big factor in Vegas's eyes. All that being said, though, I might even sprinkle a little Texas money line. I'm going to take the Longhorns in this one. I think Baylor is a very good team.
Let's go.
But I don't necessarily think that they're going to go undefeated and run the table in the Big 12. This is one of those, tough games for them on the road against Texas. You mentioned the guards. If you like watching guards play basketball, this is the game for you. Matt Coleman, Courtney Ramey, Andrew Jones on the Texas side, Davion Mitchell, Jared Butler on the Baylor side. It's going to be a great matchup to watch those two guard units battle it out all night. But the one advantage that I think that Texas has is down low. I just think they're a little bigger than Baylor. Baylor is lacking in size. That's something that we haven't really talked about much. Their starting center is about 6'8", and he's really active on the glass. He does a good job rebounding. But, Texas has got some 7-footers they're going to roll out there against you. And if you can't hang with them or if he were to get in foul trouble, I think that would spell big problems for Baylor. So I'll go Texas.
Yeah, a couple of big men that are freaky athletic, and they're both I know Sims, and I forget the other big man's name on Texas, but they're both,
Jericho Sims, Kai Jones.
Yeah, they're both getting looked at the NBA. They're just athletic freaks down low, and I guess watch out for Flo Thamba then, right, Pop?
Yeah, Flo Thamba could make an appearance.
Baylor's big man. He usually starts the game, gets like 10 minutes, and that's it. I think he'll have to play a little more against Texas. Honestly, Texas one of the few teams I think can beat Baylor, but the Shaka Smart being out may hurt them just a little bit too much for me. But we don't just cover college basketball, folks, on Cali to Cuse. We got it all. And if you haven't heard, we're about a week and a half away from the biggest event, the biggest sports event in America. The Super Bowl will be coming up next Sunday, and it's going to be played in Tampa's home. First time ever a home team gets a Super Bowl game. Or, excuse me, first time a team is in the Super Bowl that's also playing in their stadium. But we'll go over the game next week. This week, we're going to give you some player props, give you some extra time to think about who's actually going to win the game. But, Poppy, you know who's going to be scoring in the game, and that's Cameron Brate.
At least I think I do. I like Cameron Brate to score a touchdown in this one. I think he's kind of taken over for Gronk. We've seen Gronk kind of take a back seat in the pass-catching game a little bit. He's been great as a run blocker all year, but he hasn't done a ton in pass-catching. Cameron Brate He's always solid down in the red zone. Even with Jameis Winston, he was catching a ton of TDs. And, the most important thing last year, a fellow Harvard alum, Kyle Juszczyk, scores twice against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I see another Harvard alum finding the end zone against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl.
Wow.
I'm sold.
That was some analytics right there, breaking down the Harvard players. There's only a few in the league, and I guess they got the Chiefs number. With that, I mean, plus 260. How could you not throw it on Cameron Brate? But Lucas, you're going with what's this? Tom Brady over rushing yards? Is the man even going to get one?
All we need is one. All we need is one rushing yard. Right now, his line has 0.5 at plus 150. This has to come down to a quarterback sneak for a first down, a touchdown, any and all. I think he can get it. Thank God they don't account sacks as rushing yards because he's going to get popped a couple of times, in my opinion. But 1 yard is all we need. And I think he might be able to get it at plus money. It's 1 yard. I keep going back to the 1 yard. We're not talking – I think Mahomes – I think we're getting to yours, A. Scott, that his is 20x that. All we need is one.
Right. I will say, based on this pick, I don't want to jump ahead, but that probably means you're taking the Chiefs to win this because Brady, he might get some kneels at the end of the game if they're winning, take away from his rushing yards.
Oh, God, that would be the worst beat ever.
It would be a bad beat. But on to my picks, I do have Mahomes over rushing yards. His is at 20.5. I think if there is a way to stop the Chiefs offense, it's kind of just playing man coverage, really just putting as many people back in coverage as you can, which could open up some rushing lanes for Patrick Mahomes. All he needs is 2 big bursts. He does have the legs. He doesn't like to use them all that much, but I could see a nice 3rd and long. They go deep. Man coverage follows them, leads to a 15-yard rush for Mahomes. I like Mahomes rushing yards in this one.
I'm honestly shocked that it's minus 130 because he does have that foot injury, which depletes his ability to run. Maybe these 2 weeks he can rest it and be 100% to go. I'm a little more shocked. I love the bet, but I'm more shocked at what the line is because they can't be thinking he's so mobile, but it is a backbreaker when Mahomes has no options out of the Tyreek Hills and Travis Kelce of the world and then burns you for 15 yards and a first down. Nothing hurts more for a defense than that.
Yeah. I like that Tom Brady over. He's a guy who always seems to be very successful at the QB sneak, whether
That's
it's
what I'm
on the
saying.
goal line, whether he needs 1 yard on a 3rd down or 4th down. I could see him getting 1 yard. But
if it's 1.5, I don't bet it. But since it's a half, I do.
Of course, yeah. If it's 1.5, that is, I bet the under in a heartbeat.
That's what I'm saying. It's too good.
I was gonna say, Poppy, you like the over for passing for Tom Brady though.
I do like the over passing TDs for Tom Brady, mainly because of the odds. Sitting at plus 134 for the odds at over 2.5 touchdown passes from Brady in this one. I think the Chiefs are probably going to win the game, so maybe you get a garbage time touchdown. Brady had 3 TD passes in the first half last week against Green Bay, so this is certainly something he can hit in his home stadium.
Yeah, I like your 2 underdog picks. My 2 picks were kind of favorites, and I went Mahomes on both of them. Went over rush yards. I'm also going to take the over in pass yards. I got the Chiefs winning the game, and for them to do that, Mahomes needs 3 passing touchdowns. The line's at 2.5. Minus 140, so not that big of a favorite, but I like the Mahomes over touchdowns. Lucas, you're thinking it's going to be a close game for your last prop.
Yeah, this one's an interesting one for me just because I was just breaking down the numbers. I just can't – these 2 offenses are just too explosive that, it's going to come down to who can get the first stop. And if it's who can get the first stop, the max can go above is 15. I don't think this game goes – I don't think either team leads by more than 16.5 points either way, and that's even money. So you bet 100, you win 100. Under 16.5, I'd like it to be closer. And 16.5 is a lot, too. It's a 3-possession game. Do I think it's ever at one point going to be a 3-possession game? I really don't see that with these 2 teams.
Yeah, I do like that bet a lot. Poppy, any last thoughts on these player props?
No real last thoughts. I think it's going to be an interesting game, though. New school versus old school with Brady and Mahomes.
Yeah, going to be an exciting one. I expect the ratings to be through the roof on this one, especially with the pandemic, everyone being home. But we'll get into who we actually think is going to win the game, some score predictions. That'll be next week on Cali, Cuse. Next Friday, we'll be dropping that podcast. And in the meantime, head over to our Twitter at Cali to Cuse. We post all of our bets there during the week. We were a little slow on college basketball last week, but we are 27-21 on college basketball bets. That is a winning record, 6 units. Definitely want to be on the lookout for our bets. That's at Cali to Cuse on Twitter. But before we let you go, our one last thing. And this week we got some baseball talk because if you haven't heard, the Hall of Fame will not be welcoming any new members this year. Not a single person on the ballot was admitted into the Hall of Fame. You need a 75% approval rating from the voters. Nobody reached that threshold. Poppy, I saw on Twitter, I kind of opened the floodgates with my tweet saying I support the Baseball Hall of Fame decision, not letting anybody in. But you took offense to one of your Red Sox not getting in.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can be called biased for thinking Curt Schilling belongs in the Hall of Fame, but it's just something that I'm a little passionate about because I don't understand the whole character clause thing. These voters have to take into consideration character clause for each player. Curt Schilling, I am not going to get on this podcast and defend him. He is a wacko lunatic. Everyone knows that his beliefs are crazy. He's defending people storming into the Capitol. Honestly, I'm surprised he wasn't one of the people storming into the Capitol a couple weeks ago. That's the kind of person that Curt Schilling is. All that being said, Curt Schilling was also a tremendous baseball player who is probably a borderline Hall of Famer, I guess. I think he's leaning in on the Hall of Fame just based on his regular season stats alone. He has over 3,000 strikeouts, which is a huge barometer for pitchers. Over 200 wins, which is like the bare minimum that you need to have, but he does have that. 6 All-Stars, finished second in Cy Young voting 3 times, but that was to Randy Johnson twice and Roger Clemens once. So those are 2 pretty good pitchers too. But all this being said, Curt Schilling, the reason he does deserve to get in is that 11-2 postseason record with a 2.23 ERA. One of the greatest postseason pitchers of all time, an iconic postseason performance to overturn the curse for the Red Sox in Yankee Stadium. And I just think, you can't leave a guy like that out of the Hall of Fame because he has wacky political beliefs. There's a lot of people in there in that Hall of Fame that were not good people back in the day, but the media didn't cover that side of things. Now the media covers that stuff, so we see that on Curt Schilling.
I love that rant. Lucas, you saw the Twitter beef. You saw this him and Paul Reagan going at it from your stance. Curt Schilling in there. Any thoughts on just the Hall of Fame in general?
I was honestly happy that you mentioned Jeff Kent because Jeff Kent was a great Giant, and I was like, this is perfect. Obviously, being a Giants fan, I know how this Hall of Fame thing goes. Barry B will probably never be in the Hall of Fame, unfortunately, as the home run leader. Sad to see. It's so messy because you mentioned, like, not everybody in the Hall of Fame in any sport is a saint to begin with. And so having kind of this nix on him because he is an absolute asshole on the internet doesn't dissuade from the fact that he was an incredible baseball player. If Curt Schilling was doing that as vocally as he was doing while he was playing, that would be more of a fair argument. Mm-hmm. But he's well past his MLB career. I would probably venture to say that people more recognize Curt Schilling now for his political views and don't even remember him as a Red Sox. It's insane that the numbers that you just mentioned, that screams to me like he should at least get a look at the Hall of Fame, but not even sniffing it. Is crazy. We all know how MLB is with the Hall of Fame. They act like it's a club that is the highest of honor. You let in Pete Rose a while back, and then I think you rescinded it. So, people make mistakes. So I think Curt Schilling, based on his resume, should be in.
Yeah, I think the regular season numbers, if he won a Cy Young, I know he finished second to 2 of the greatest pitchers ever. If he wins one, he's in no matter what. But you had those postseason numbers, which I didn't know before I tweeted that out. And once you mentioned his numbers in the postseason, I mean, that's where it really counts. Only 2 losses in the postseason. I think he has, 2 rings, right? Maybe 3.
Yeah, 2 rings.
2 rings, and he's been a part of both of them, very instrumental part. And you combine that with his overall resume, I think he does get in my book. And then I can see why he's not in, though, because of the voters. And I think you hit it right on the head, everything you said, Poppy. And in my book, I probably would look past that because you're right. I mean, you got to look at the precedents that have been set. Not everybody in there is a saint, and you got to judge them on the baseball diamond because it is the Baseball Hall of Fame. But people getting mad on Twitter that nobody's in for no good reason, I don't like that because I think there are some years that nobody does deserve to get in. Not every year does someone need to get in the Hall of Fame. It's a very exclusive club. Steroids are a whole nother issue that I wouldn't put somebody in with steroids. That's a whole nother issue. I just like how exclusive it is. I thought this year I probably would have voted Schilling in if I had talked to Poppy before I cast my vote, and he persuaded me. I would also put Jeff Kent in just because he's probably one of the best second basemen of all time. Not necessarily his numbers in general, but combine that with what position he played and where he ranked as second baseman. He has to get in. But I kind of do stand by the Baseball Hall of Fame. I do see why they put nobody in. I got to ask you, Lucas, Barry Bonds, steroids, as a Giants fan, do you think he should be in?
That's a loaded question. I think he does. I think he does deserve to be put in because he was a fantastic player on the Pirates too, right before he went to become a home run hitting legend in San Francisco. It's so tough, you know. Steroids, obviously cheating, but at the same time, he was pretty damn good without it as well. Maybe not the career stats that would have ended if he hadn't juiced, but the resume itself, he's an icon to San Francisco. San Francisco has forgiven him. You know, there was this long time where we weren't really sure how we felt about Barry Bonds, and just like time, it heals all. So we're fans of him now, and if the fan base behind him can get behind him, why can't the MLB get behind him if we can forgive?
Right. They're just old and stubborn, just like Jim Boeheim. The Baseball Hall of Fame writers are a bunch of Jim Boeheims, essentially. But, Poppy, on that ballot, anybody else you would have put in besides Schilling?
I like the Jeff Kent argument. I think that Jeff Kent, I don't necessarily think I'm putting him in within his first 7 years on the ballot. Maybe later on, kind of like how Larry Walker last year snuck in his final year on the ballot. I think Jeff Kent could sneak in because of that, because he was a great second baseman, especially as a hitter. Scott Rowland, there's a lot of talk for him going in. I really don't like the Scott Rowland talk. He's got 8 gold gloves, which is a big plus for him. And he has solid offensive numbers, but you got guys like Ken Rosenthal saying that he belongs in the Hall of Fame because third base is an underrepresented position. That is not how you should be putting people in the Hall of Fame. They're a Hall of Fame worthy player if they're a Hall of Fame worthy player, not because there aren't a lot of third basemen in the Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. Jeff Kent is a little different because he was so great at a position where offense isn't typically given to your team, second base.
Yeah. And honestly, I just like that now no one got in. I think it just makes a statement that you really need.
I don't mind that either. I don't mind that nobody.
I don't mind it. I do agree that some players should have gotten in. But that's about all the time we have on our podcast. Thank you guys for joining us. You can catch us every Friday. Make sure to head over to the challenge-sports.com for a bunch of articles. You can always find our podcast there, some merchandise. And then follow us on Twitter, @Cuse. We're always sending out winners. So make sure you follow us and make a little bit of money while you're listening to us. Thanks again for joining us, and have a good week, everyone.